Have you ever wondered why someone who seemed completely unaffected by losing you suddenly starts living in your mind again, almost as if something invisible has changed between you? What if the silence you received was never the full story? And what if the moment you stopped chasing was the exact moment they could no longer escape their own thoughts? Stay with this until the end, because you'll discover why the greatest shift never happens when you convince an avoidant to love you. It happens when you become someone they can no longer explain away. More importantly, you'll learn how this understanding can completely change the way you see yourself, your value, and every relationship that follows. There is something many people misunderstand about avoidant personalities. They believe that if an avoidant walks away without looking back, they simply never cared. They assume that silence means peace. They mistake emotional distance for emotional freedom. But human psychology tells a much more complex story. The mind has a strange way of protecting itself. Sometimes it buries emotions so deeply that even the person feeling them believes they have disappeared. Yet buried emotions do not vanish. They wait. They grow quietly in places that logic cannot reach. This is why you must stop measuring your worth by another person's reaction. Some people react immediately. Others react only after life removes every distraction they used to avoid themselves. The timing is different, but the human heart rarely ignores unfinished emotional experiences forever. The truth is, people with avoidant tendencies often become experts at escaping discomfort. When emotions become intense, their first instinct is not always to understand those feelings. Their instinct is to create distance. Distance feels safe. Distance feels like control. Distance gives them the illusion that if they cannot see the emotion, then perhaps they do not have to feel it either. For a while, this strategy seems to work. They fill their days with work, entertainment, routines, new conversations, or endless distractions. Every hour becomes another opportunity to avoid looking inward. From the outside, it may even appear that they moved on effortlessly. Meanwhile, the person they left behind is often questioning everything. They replay conversations. They wonder what they did wrong. They search for answers inside themselves, while the avoidant appears perfectly fine. But appearances can be misleading. The human mind cannot outrun itself forever. Every distraction has an expiration date. Every escape eventually becomes another empty hallway leading back to the same locked door. And behind that door are the emotions that were never processed. This is where everything begins to change, because something unexpected happens when you stop chasing someone who constantly runs. You remove the very dynamic they depended on. The constant reassurance disappears. The emotional pressure disappears. The familiar pattern disappears. Suddenly, there is nothing left to distract them from the silence they created. Silence is a powerful teacher. It forces people to hear thoughts they spent months trying to avoid. It forces memories to become louder than notifications. It forces the heart to ask questions that pride refused to answer. This does not happen because of manipulation. It does not happen because of games. It happens because human psychology follows patterns that cannot be controlled forever. The mind seeks closure. The heart seeks meaning. And when something meaningful ends without emotional resolution, the memory refuses to stay buried. But here is where most people make a painful mistake. The moment they notice signs that the avoidant may be thinking about them again, they immediately return to chasing. They rush back with hope. They believe this is finally the moment everything will be different. Yet the strongest position you can ever stand in is not the position of pursuit. It is the position of growth. Read that again in your heart. Your greatest power has never been your ability to make someone miss you. Your greatest power is becoming the version of yourself who no longer needs someone else's attention to feel complete. That changes everything. Because confidence is different from desperation. Peace is different from anxiety. Self-respect carries an energy that no performance can imitate. People notice it, even when no words are spoken. Think about your own life. Have you ever ignored something valuable simply because you believed it would always be there? Human beings often fail to recognize value through constant availability. Familiarity creates comfort, but it can also create blindness. Only when something is truly absent do people begin to understand the space it occupied. This is not just about romantic relationships. It is about human nature. We often realize the importance of health after illness. We understand the value of time after wasting years. We appreciate loyalty only after experiencing betrayal. We recognize genuine love only after living through emotional emptiness. That is why your journey cannot revolve around waiting for another person's realization. If your happiness depends on someone else's awakening, then your life remains trapped inside a decision you do not control. Real freedom begins somewhere else. It begins the moment you realize that every painful experience carries an invitation to become stronger, wiser, more emotionally grounded, more connected to yourself than ever before. Ironically, this inner transformation is often the very thing that changes how others see you. People are naturally drawn toward emotional certainty. They notice those who carry quiet confidence instead of constant need. They respect those who choose themselves without becoming bitter. They become curious about people who continue growing even after disappointment. That curiosity is powerful, because when someone expected you to remain emotionally available forever, your growth creates questions they never expected to ask. They begin wondering how you became so calm. They begin remembering your kindness without the emotional noise that once clouded their judgment. They begin comparing temporary distractions with the genuine connection they once experienced. And this is where the story truly begins, not with their realization, but with yours. The moment you stop living for someone else's validation is the moment your life starts belonging to you again. That shift cannot be faked. It cannot be borrowed. It must be earned through every difficult day you chose healing over chasing, every lonely night you chose growth over obsession, and every moment you decided that your future deserved more than waiting for someone to finally see your worth. There comes a moment when the person who always seemed comfortable with distance begins to experience something they never planned for. Nothing dramatic happens overnight. There is no sudden flash of realization. Instead, it starts quietly. A thought appears without permission. A memory returns while they are busy with something else. A familiar laugh echoes in their mind. A simple place, a song, or even a random conversation reminds them of someone they believed they had already left behind. This is where many people misunderstand the way the human mind works. We often believe that forgetting is a choice. It is not. The brain holds on to experiences that carried emotional weight, whether those emotions were fully expressed or carefully hidden. Someone can convince themselves that they have moved on, yet their subconscious continues processing everything they refused to face. Avoidant individuals are especially familiar with this pattern. When emotional closeness begins to feel overwhelming, they often respond by creating space. At that moment, distance feels like relief. It feels logical. They believe they have solved the problem simply by removing themselves from it. But emotions do not disappear just because the environment changes. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every day. At first, you barely notice its weight because you have become used to it. But once you finally set it down, your body begins to recognize how much pressure it had been carrying all along. Emotional experiences work in a similar way. Sometimes the impact is not fully felt while everything is happening. It becomes clear only after life slows down enough for the mind to catch up. This explains why thoughts often return long after the relationship has ended. At first, there are countless distractions. Daily routines fill every hour. New responsibilities demand attention. Social events create temporary excitement. Everything seems to move forward. Yet as weeks become months, the noise begins to fade. The moments of complete silence become more frequent. Silence has a unique effect on the human brain. Without constant stimulation, the mind naturally reviews unfinished experiences. It searches for meaning. It revisits decisions. It asks questions that were ignored before. This is not weakness. It is part of how people process significant emotional events. Someone who avoided vulnerability may suddenly remember the conversations they rushed through. They begin thinking about the support they quietly received. They notice the patience that was once taken for granted. They replay moments they barely appreciated because fear kept them focused on protecting themselves instead of fully connecting. What seemed ordinary suddenly feels rare. The strange part is that these realizations often arrive when there is no expectation of them. They appear while driving home after work. They surface during quiet evenings. They interrupt ordinary days with extraordinary memories. This is why trying to force someone into recognizing your value usually fails. Real understanding cannot be demanded. It develops naturally when the mind has enough space to examine reality without pressure. Every lesson that truly changes a person comes from within. External arguments rarely create lasting transformation. Internal reflection does. Now think about what this means for your own journey. While another person is slowly confronting emotions they once avoided, your responsibility remains exactly the same. Continue building a life that does not depend on anyone else's emotional timeline. This is where many people lose themselves. Instead of investing energy into their own future, they become detectives. They search social media for clues. They analyze every online activity. They ask mutual friends for updates. They spend hours trying to answer questions that only one person can answer, but every minute spent monitoring someone else's life is a minute stolen from your own growth. Psychology teaches something incredibly important about attention. Whatever receives your focus becomes stronger inside your mind. If you constantly feed uncertainty, uncertainty grows. If you repeatedly feed confidence, confidence becomes part of your identity. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Protect it carefully. Direct it toward your health, your goals, your character, your peace of mind. Every positive action sends a quiet message to your subconscious. My future deserves my energy. That message changes you from the inside. Over time, your posture changes. Your conversations change. Your choices become healthier. You stop making decisions based on fear of losing people. Instead, you begin choosing what aligns with your values. Ironically, this is the version of you that leaves the deepest impression. Not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because authenticity has a quiet strength. It cannot be manufactured. It comes from knowing who you are without needing constant approval. People sense that difference. They notice when someone no longer seeks validation in every interaction. They recognize emotional stability because it feels rare in a world driven by constant reaction. Meanwhile, the avoidant mind may continue asking questions it once refused to consider. Was walking away really the answer? Why does that person still come to mind? Why do new experiences feel temporary while old memories remain vivid? These questions are uncomfortable because they challenge the story they once told themselves. It is much easier to believe that leaving solved everything. It is much harder to admit that the connection mattered more than they allowed themselves to believe. That does not mean every avoidant will return. It does not mean every relationship will be rebuilt. Human beings make different choices, and every situation is unique. What it does mean is that emotional truth has remarkable patience. It waits beneath busy schedules, loud environments, and carefully constructed routines. It waits until there is enough honesty for someone to face it. As for you, the goal is no longer to wonder whether they are thinking about you. The greater victory is reaching a place where your peace is no longer tied to the answer. Because when your confidence comes from within, another person's realization becomes a possibility instead of a necessity. That is the difference between living from need and living from strength. And once you experience that difference, you begin to understand that the most meaningful transformation was never happening inside their mind alone. It was quietly taking place inside yours, preparing you for a future built on self-respect instead of emotional dependence. Once you reach that point, something important begins to happen. You stop asking whether they miss you, and you start asking a much better question. Why do some people only understand the value of a connection after it is gone? That question takes you beyond one relationship. It leads you into one of the deepest truths about human behavior. People rarely see clearly while fear is in control. Fear changes perception. It narrows attention. It convinces a person that immediate comfort is more important than long-term fulfillment. Someone with avoidant tendencies often experiences closeness as emotional pressure instead of emotional safety. They may genuinely enjoy being with you, yet as the relationship grows deeper, another voice begins speaking inside them. That voice says, "You are losing your independence." It whispers, "If this continues, you might get hurt." It warns, "Leave before someone gets too close." These thoughts are not always based on the present. Many of them are echoes from the past. Old disappointments, broken trust, painful experiences, or childhood patterns can quietly shape how someone responds years later. Without realizing it, they begin treating a caring person as though they are preparing for a threat that no longer exists. This is one of the greatest tricks fear can play on the human mind. It makes protection feel more important than connection. For a while, choosing distance seems like the safest path. It creates temporary relief. because the uncomfortable emotions become less intense. The person feels as though they have regained control. But there is one problem. Relief is not the same as healing. Imagine covering a warning light on a car's dashboard with tape instead of fixing the engine. The light disappears from view, but the problem remains exactly where it was. Emotional avoidance works in much the same way. Ignoring inner conflict does not remove it. It simply delays the moment when it must finally be faced. Eventually, life creates situations that cannot be escaped. Perhaps they see another couple sharing genuine happiness. Maybe they achieve career success, but still feel strangely empty when they return home. Perhaps they accomplish goals they believed would satisfy them, only to discover that achievement cannot replace emotional connection. These moments create a quiet conflict inside them. They begin comparing what they have with what they once experienced. Suddenly, the memories they dismissed start carrying a different meaning. Conversations they overlooked now seem valuable. Small acts of kindness become unforgettable. They remember the way someone listened without judgment, encouraged their dreams, or remained patient during difficult times. The mind starts connecting pieces that were never connected before. This process is uncomfortable because it requires honesty. Honest reflection forces people to admit that not every decision was made from wisdom. Some choices were made from fear disguised as logic. That realization can be difficult to accept. No one enjoys recognizing that they may have walked away from something meaningful because they were trying to protect themselves from possibilities that never actually happened. This is why emotional maturity matters so much. Maturity is not about never making mistakes. It is about having the courage to learn from them instead of pretending they never existed. Every person reaches crossroads where they must choose between protecting their pride or expanding their understanding. Growth always begins with truth. Now consider your own path during this same period. While another person may be questioning old decisions, your responsibility is to continue becoming someone whose peace cannot be shaken by someone else's uncertainty. That means refusing to build your identity around being chosen. Many people unknowingly do this. They believe acceptance from another person will finally prove they are enough. They wait for a message, an apology, or a second chance to confirm their worth. But confidence built on another person's actions is always fragile because it depends on something outside your control. Real confidence grows differently. It develops each time you keep a promise to yourself. It becomes stronger every time you choose discipline instead of excuses. It expands whenever you refuse to settle for treatment that does not match your values. These quiet decisions reshape your character more than any dramatic moment ever could. Human psychology shows that repeated actions slowly become part of identity. If you consistently act with dignity, your mind begins seeing you as someone deserving of respect. If you repeatedly abandon your own standards just to keep someone close, your subconscious learns a very different lesson. Your habits are always teaching your mind who you believe you are. That is why your daily choices matter far beyond the present moment. Every healthy boundary tells your brain that your emotional well-being has value. Every step toward your goals reinforces the belief that your future deserves attention. Every act of self-respect becomes another brick in the foundation of a stronger life. The beautiful part is that this kind of strength does not need to announce itself. It shows in the calm way you respond to disappointment. It appears in your ability to walk away from situations that diminish your spirit. It becomes visible through quiet confidence instead of constant explanation. People naturally recognize this difference because genuine inner stability cannot be copied. Meanwhile, someone who once believed leaving would erase every feeling may discover that time has done something unexpected. Instead of deleting the connection, it has removed the distractions that kept deeper emotions hidden. Without those distractions, they are finally left alone with their own thoughts. Sometimes the hardest conversation a person will ever have is the silent one inside their own mind. That conversation cannot be avoided forever. It asks difficult questions. Did fear make my decisions? Did I mistake emotional safety for emotional danger? Did I let someone valuable walk away because vulnerability felt uncomfortable? Whether those questions lead to action depends on the individual. Every person has free will. Some will face those answers with courage. Others may continue running from them. Your purpose is not to control that outcome. Your purpose is to become someone whose life keeps moving forward, regardless of another person's response. because the greatest transformation does not happen when someone finally realizes your value. It happens when you no longer need their realization to believe in it yourself. From that place, every decision becomes clearer, every relationship becomes healthier, and every step you take is guided by self-respect instead of fear. That is the foundation of a life that no one can take away from you.